As I'm speaking right now, it's Memorial Day, and I'm mindful of the hundreds of thousands of Americans who died, some for a good cause in wars, and some not for a good cause, just a waste. But I think there can be no better commemoration of the sacrifice of all these people and their families than to kick one of the men who profits from wars right in the nuts as hard as you can. Lots more on that in a minute. But first, full disclosure. Ever since I saw this footage, I thought, that bastard has been vaccinated. Trump's valet has coronavirus. 11 of his Secret Service crew have it. The ghoul Stephen Miller may be Trump's closest advisor. He's a ghoul, but his wife has coronavirus, and she works inside the White House. A ghoul with the virus haunted the Republican CPAC conference and shook hands with Trump's chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, seen here at the conference.
They've got a little bit of a cold.
Trump immediately fired him. The replacement chief of staff, Mark Meadows, immediately had to be quarantined because he shook hands with the ghoul. Pence shook hands with this ghoul and should have been quarantined, as did Ivanka, Eric's wife, and close Trump friend Doug Collins, seen here hours after he shook hands with the ghoul. Matt Gaetz shook hands with the CPAC ghoul and then got on Air Force One and rode with Trump in that confined area for 40 minutes. Trump is literally surrounded by the virus. The West Wing is swarming with it, and yet this idiot won't wear a mask. He's famous for being a coward and a germaphobe.
I'm also very much of a germaphobe.
And he wades into crowds, and he won't wear a mask. He must have some sort of secret protection against the virus, no? But so, why isn't he sharing his secret with the poor American masses huddled in quarantine and yearning to breathe free? It would make him a hero, no? So why not? Is it because he's been vaccinated? You see, vaccines take decades to develop. Polio took 17 years and another 45 years to perfect. After decades, there are still no vaccines for the viruses that cause AIDS, Ebola, or malaria. So you see, if Trump had been secretly vaccinated, that would mean that the U.S. military had been in possession of the virus for years, and that is something they would need to keep a secret, eh? But, so, let's take a serious look at this vaccine question for a minute. There's this story quietly breaking that this Oxford lab just got handed $1 billion to start today massively producing hundreds of millions of doses of a coronavirus vaccine for which there has been no human testing.
Researchers say they are moving at historic speed, telling NBC News by June or July they could start large-scale clinical trials in America.
Did you get that? This is Trump's pre-election and re-election surprise. They have the vaccine now, and they are in production today, producing hundreds of millions of doses of a vaccine that has not been tested on humans. They have somehow, miraculously, developed a safe, effective vaccine, a process that can take decades, and these guys have literally done it overnight. The director of the program can't believe what is happening.
If you'd said that to me a month ago, that all of that would happen in a month, I'd have thought that was wild.
And there's a reason he can't believe it. This Adrian Hill, the director of the program, has worked for 20 years trying to develop a vaccine for malaria. 20 years he's worked, 70 projects, 0 success. And Friday, May 22nd, suddenly he was handed $1 billion to produce hundreds of millions of doses of a vaccine that he somehow produced instantly that has not been tested on humans. Baffling.
If you'd said that to me a month ago, that all of that would happen in a month, I'd have thought that was wild.
And he's not kidding. They are spending $1 billion to produce a vaccine, and their sole justification for doing this is that the Rocky Mountain Laboratory in Montana tested the vaccine last month on monkeys. Scientists at this lab gave the vaccine to 6 rhesus monkeys, then exposed them to large amounts of COVID-19, and 28 days later, none of the monkeys had the virus. Okay, but let's do some easy math. This article appeared on April 27th, and it cites the results of an experiment that took 28 days. So this means that these Oxford guys had gotten their vaccine to the Montana lab at least 28 days before the April 27th article. So, by March 31st at the latest, the Oxford lab sent their miracle vaccine to the Montana lab. But you can't develop a vaccine unless you have the actual virus. And the virus didn't show up in Britain until February 28th. It then takes time to isolate the virus. The Chinese, who are the best at this stuff, took 12 days. That takes us to March 12th as a reasonable date to believe the Oxford lab had the virus isolated. But then they have to collect enough of the virus to be able to work with it, and using the cutting-edge gene splicing techniques of the Oxford lab, they then have to begin the random process of gene splicing and manipulation and testing and retesting, taking shots in the dark and hoping for the best, looking for the short strand of DNA that will produce the result that they're looking for. This is a process that can take decades, and you may still strike out after decades of work, as Dr. Hill has done for 20 years. It's not.
The question isn't when we're going to have a vaccine, it's if we're going to have a vaccine.
For example, there is still no vaccine for the original coronavirus that struck 18 years ago. So anyway, in the 19 days between March 12th and March 31st, the Oxford lab somehow, miraculously, impossibly, ridiculously produced a completely safe and highly effective vaccine. And the Montana lab then looked at the Oxford lab's 20-year track record of 0 successes and saw their completely unbelievable, instantaneous production of the vaccine, and so they said, oh yes, well indeed, let's squirt this stuff into our monkeys. And they did, and the monkeys didn't get sick. So now the U.S. is pouring $1 billion to begin producing hundreds of millions of doses to be available in the U.S. in June or July. Does any of that sound right to you?
If you'd said that to me a month ago, that all of that would happen in a month, I'd have thought that was wild.
Dr. Fauci doesn't sound enthused about it. He can barely bring himself to say a muffled, shamefaced yes.
Do you feel that's in the realm of possibility?
Yeah.
This same day that the U.S. decided to give the Oxford lab $1 billion to make,
not millions, probably not tens of millions, but ideally hundreds of millions of doses of this vaccine.
Fauci tried as hard as he could to rain on this parade. He told The Hill, even if you do everything right and you do everything on time, there's no guarantee you're going to have an effective vaccine. So when we talk about having a vaccine that might be available in December or January, that's assuming that the vaccine is actually effective, which is not a valid assumption because vaccine candidates, even promising ones, fail more often than they succeed. Which is why this guy says it's not.
The question isn't when we're going to have a vaccine, it's if we're going to have a vaccine.
But you can't stop some people. This war profiteer desperately needs a monumental Memorial Day kick in the nuts. This is Mark Esper, Raytheon lobbyist and now the Secretary of Defense, speaking the same day as Fauci, the Friday of Memorial Day weekend.
Winning matters, and we will deliver, by the end of this year, a vaccine at scale to treat the American people and our partners abroad.
What the fuck is the Pentagon doing even trying to inject themselves into this issue of when a vaccine might be available? This steaming Sacagawea isn't a doctor or a scientist of any kind. He's a low-down slimeball lobbyist. The reporter can't believe her ears.
Mr. Secretary, I was so struck by that because there were no weasel words. There was no, we hope to have it by the end of the year. You said we will have a vaccine at scale, meaning presumably hundreds of millions of doses, ready to go by the end of the year. Is that possible?
Absolutely, it's possible. And I've spoken to our medical experts.
You know, the experts. We know they're experts because they have medals on them that say expert.
We are completely confident that we can get this done. And look, the Defense Department's been on top of the coronavirus since the early days. We were in this fight from late January on when we were first bringing Americans back from China. and we've been ahead of the curve and in the fight from day one.
God damn, dude, really? There was no testing until March. Ahead of the curve? By March 6th, the U.S. had tested 2,000 people for coronavirus, while South Korea had tested more than 140,000. Your lame ass was 7,000% behind the curve set by South Korea, and you're bragging? You just bragged about bringing people back from China. Those are the people, the ones you brought back, who are presumed to be the source of all the death in this country. 96,000 today, Memorial Day. And you brought them back and tested none of them. Your quarantine on your military bases was such a total nightmarish disaster that people risked their careers to blow the whistle on your incompetence. Ahead of the curve? Are you sick? Bragging about your disasters. When you fuck up and accidentally kill 100,000 people, you don't brag about it.
And we will deliver on time the vaccines.
We will deliver. You and what army?
You know, our medical experts, our researchers, and we have some of the best in the world, have been working on this vaccine now for a few months, ever since day one. And again, I'm confident we'll get it. DOD has the expertise
in killing people.
And the capability, of course, to get the manufacturing done and the logistics.
Right. Manufacturing and logistics. Remind us again of the great job you did handling the manufacturing and logistics with tests and masks and PPE. What an imbecile.
And I'm confident that we will deliver.
Now, wait.
You know, our medical experts, our researchers, and we have some of the best in the world, have been working on this vaccine now ever since day one. And again, I'm confident we'll get it. DOD has the expertise.
This is curious, no? The military trying to insert themselves into this. Why? Their job is killing people, right? Developing weapons, not cures, right? Not vaccines, right? Well, no. Now that this douchebag mentions it, the military does have to make vaccines when they're making bioweapons at their bioweapons lab in Fort Detrick, Maryland. If you want to develop diseases, which these guys do, and use them as weapons, which these guys do, you also have to develop a vaccine to protect your own people, your troops, and your generals, and your president and whatnot, which is what these fuckers clearly did.